You're sitting at your kitchen table on a Sunday night with 4 debt balances open on your laptop. Credit card at 24%. Student loan at 6.8%. Car payment at 9.5%. Medical bill at 0%. You've decided tonight is the night you finally make a real plan. So you do what everyone does. You Google it, and within about 4 minutes you've read 2 completely contradictory articles, both citing math, both sounding completely confident, one telling you to pay the highest interest rate first, and one telling you to pay the smallest balance first. And now you're more confused than when you started, which means the laptop closes and the plan doesn't happen and the debt stays exactly where it was. Here's the thing. Both articles were right. And both articles were incomplete in exactly the same way. They told you which method wins mathematically in a vacuum. Neither of them told you which method wins for an actual human being making real decisions under real financial pressure over a multi-year period. And that gap between the math and the human is where almost every debt payoff plan that starts on a Sunday night quietly dies by February. This video is about what the math actually says when you run both methods against each other with real numbers. And then it's about the research that explains why the mathematically inferior method beats the mathematically superior one in the real world more often than most people want to admit. And I'll warn you now, the behavioral economics section is going to make the math people in the comments genuinely uncomfortable because the data is not ambiguous. My name is Gaurav, and I spend a genuinely unreasonable amount of time pulling apart the financial advice that sounds settled but isn't. If you've ever started a debt payoff plan and abandoned it before it finished, subscribe and hit that like button because today we're running the full comparison that neither article gave you. Quick thing first, not a financial advisor, not financial advice, just the math, the research, and the part of the comparison that gets left out of both sides of this debate. Let me introduce you to 2 people, Keisha and Marcus. Both 29, both with identical debt profiles, a $6,200 credit card balance at 24% interest, a $14,500 student loan at 6.8%, a $3,100 car loan at 9.5%, total debt identical, same minimum payments, same $500 a month available above minimums to accelerate payoff. Keisha uses the Avalanche method, highest interest rate first. Marcus uses the Snowball method, smallest balance first. Both are committed, both follow through perfectly. Hold on to them. We'll come back. Here's the framing that makes this entire comparison click. The Avalanche method is mathematically optimal. Full stop. No serious financial researcher disputes this. If you follow it perfectly, you will pay less total interest than any other payoff sequence because you're eliminating the highest cost debt first, which minimizes the number of months that the highest rate is accruing. The math is not close. It is simply, definitionally, the cheapest path through a multi-debt payoff. The Snowball method is psychologically optimal, and the research suggesting that psychological optimization outperforms mathematical optimization in real-world debt payoff is, at this point, sufficiently robust that dismissing it as a soft variable is no longer a defensible position. It's the actual finding. Let's go through exactly why, starting with the math that settles the first half of the debate. Layer 1. What the math actually says with real numbers. Keisha's Avalanche sequence. She attacks the credit card at 24% first. With $500 a month above minimums plus the minimum she was already paying on the card, she puts roughly $620 a month toward the credit card balance. At 24% annual interest on $6,200, her monthly interest charge starts at roughly $124. She pays off the credit card in approximately 11 months, paying roughly $780 in total interest on that balance. She then rolls the freed-up payment toward the car loan at 9.5%. Combined with what she was already paying on the car, she's now putting approximately $780 a month toward the $3,100 remaining car balance. She clears it in roughly 4 months, paying approximately $70 in additional interest. Finally, everything rolls toward the student loan at 6.8%. She's now applying over $1,000 a month toward the remaining student loan balance. She pays it off in approximately 15 months, paying roughly $580 in total interest on the student loan portion. Total time for Keisha to eliminate all debt, approximately 30 months. Total interest paid across all 3 debts, approximately $1,430, Marcus's Snowball sequence. He attacks the car loan at $3,100 first, the smallest balance, regardless of its 9.5% rate. With $500 above minimums directed here, he puts roughly $610 a month toward the car. He pays it off in approximately 5 months, paying roughly $120 in interest. He then rolls the freed payment toward the credit card at $6,200, now applying approximately $780 a month toward the card at 24%. The interest has been accruing during those 5 months at full rate. He pays off the credit card in approximately 9 months, paying roughly $1,040 in total card interest, meaningfully more than Keisha paid on the same balance because the high-rate debt ran longer. Finally, everything rolls toward the student loan. Similar timeline to Keisha from this point. Total additional interest approximately $590. Total time for Marcus to eliminate all debt. Approximately 30 months. Total interest paid, approximately $1,750. The difference is $320 over 30 months. That's the mathematical cost of the Snowball method over the Avalanche method on this specific debt profile. $10.67 a month, in exchange for what exactly we'll get to in a moment. But first, notice something important. The total time to debt freedom is essentially identical. That's not always the case, particularly when debt balances are more dramatically different. But for many common debt profiles, the time difference between Avalanche and Snowball is smaller than people expect. And the interest difference, while real, is also often smaller than the math-first arguments suggest. Layer 2. What the research says about who actually finishes. Here's the study that changes this entire debate. A 2012 paper published in the Journal of Marketing Research by researchers Modi Amer, Dan Ariely, Shahar Isle, Cynthia Kreider, and Scott Rick examined how people actually pay down debt when given autonomy over the sequence. Their central finding, replicated in subsequent research, was that people who paid off small balances first, regardless of interest rate, were significantly more likely to eliminate their debt entirely than people who followed mathematically optimal sequences. The mechanism they identified was what they called the goal gradient effect. As a debt balance approaches zero, the motivational pull toward completing it accelerates. People work harder, stay more committed, and resist the temptation to stop when they can see the finish line of a specific balance. The Snowball method creates multiple finish lines, each one generating a small but measurable motivational boost that sustains the overall plan. The Avalanche method, particularly when the highest rate debt is also a large balance, can require many months of consistent payment before any single debt is eliminated, during which period the motivational sustain comes purely from abstract math with no visible finish line. A follow-up study from Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management found that for people with multiple debts, the probability of complete debt elimination was higher when they focused on one account at a time regardless of interest rate, compared to optimal interest rate-based allocation, even after controlling for initial motivation and financial literacy. In other words, the mathematically better plan fails more often. The mathematically inferior plan completes more often, and a completed inferior plan beats an abandoned superior plan by an infinite margin. Layer 3. The variable nobody models. Here's what both the Snowball article and the Avalanche article consistently leave out. The comparison assumes perfect execution of whichever method you choose. It models the math from month 1 to month 30, assuming you never miss a payment. Never redirect that $500 to something else. Never get discouraged and quietly stop. But perfect execution isn't the variable to optimize for. Probability of sustained execution is the variable to optimize for. And probability of sustained execution is exactly what the behavioral research is measuring. The $320 in additional interest Marcus pays by using the Snowball method is only a cost if he would have completed the Avalanche method with equal probability. If the Avalanche method carried even a marginally higher abandonment rate, the expected cost comparison flips entirely, because an abandoned Avalanche plan doesn't save Marcus anything. It leaves him with the same debt he started with, plus whatever interest accrued during the months he was paying above minimums before quitting. A 2016 meta-analysis in the Journal of Consumer Research examined multiple debt payoff studies, and found that for people who had previously abandoned a debt payoff plan, the completion rate on their subsequent attempt was dramatically higher when that second attempt used a balance-focused rather than rate-focused sequence. The researchers concluded that for people with any history of starting and stopping financial plans, the psychological structure of the plan matters as much as the mathematical structure, often more. This is the layer neither article mentions, because it requires the writer to acknowledge that their reader might quit. And personal finance writing is not generally in the business of assuming readers quit things. So here's the practical framework. Not a recommendation to pick one method blindly. A decision process that actually accounts for both the math and the human using the math. First, run the actual numbers on your specific debt profile, not a generic comparison. Your balances, your rates, your available monthly payment above minimums. The interest difference between Avalanche and Snowball varies enormously depending on the specific balance and rate combinations. In some profiles, the difference is hundreds of dollars over 2 years. In others, it's thousands. You need your specific number before you can make a rational trade-off decision. Second, assess your own completion history honestly. Have you started and abandoned a debt payoff plan before? If yes, the behavioral research suggests your completion probability is higher with Snowball regardless of the math. The $320, or whatever your specific interest difference, turns out to be made genuinely be worth paying for the higher probability of actually finishing. If you've never started a plan before, the math difference is larger in relative terms because you don't yet have evidence about your own completion probability. Third, consider a hybrid approach that the research supports. Identify any single small balance you can eliminate completely within the first 2 to 3 months. Use your accelerated payment to clear that balance first regardless of its rate. Then switch to Avalanche for the remaining balances. You get one early motivational win from the Snowball structure, then the mathematical efficiency of Avalanche for the majority of the payoff period. This isn't a compromise that leaves you worse on both dimensions. It's a structure that the behavioral research suggests captures most of the completion rate benefit of Snowball while preserving most of the interest savings of Avalanche. Keisha and Marcus, by the way, both finished. In this particular comparison, both methods worked because both people followed through completely. Keisha saved $320. Marcus got 5 quick wins instead of one long grind. Neither of them would trade their outcome for the others, which tells you something important about how personal the personal in personal finance actually is. But here's the truth that the Sunday night Google search doesn't surface. The right debt payoff method is the one you'll still be executing in month 19, when the motivation that existed in month 1 has completely evaporated, and the only thing keeping you going is the structural momentum of the plan you set up. For most people, that structure is Snowball. For some, it's Avalanche. For very few, the mathematical difference is large enough and their completion confidence is high enough that Avalanche is the clear answer regardless of psychology. The debt doesn't care which method you chose. It only cares whether you finished. If this settled the question for you or raised a new one, drop a comment telling me which method you're using and whether you've ever abandoned a debt payoff plan before finishing it. I actually read them. And if you want the full picture on how the invisible taxes on your paycheck affect how much you have available to throw at that debt every month, that video is on the screen right now. Go watch that one next. I'll see you in it.